Hello, and welcome to the Super 70 Podcast. Special report, Galveston, with Dave Anderson. I'd like to open by thanking everyone for still subscribing to the Super 70 Podcast after 4 years. I'm not as prolific as I'd like to be, so I thank you for being patient. Dave and I have a lot planned, and I hope you'll stick around for some more commentaries and interdisciplinary discussions on film as art. A few weeks ago, Dave and I spent the weekend on Galveston Island, cracked a few beers, and took on some uncomfortable topics. These include, but are not limited to, the two most controversial films of the 1980s. Why films with problematic racism should be protected as time capsules. We celebrate the release of Bruce Lee's greatest hits by the Criterion Collection. Then we wrap up discussions by arguing over how to pronounce the names of Hollywood legends Sidney Poitier and Kirstie Alley. Join Dave and I on Galveston Island just weeks before it was forced to evacuate for Hurricane Laura. Well, I didn't have anything like profound or controversial. I just happened to, the last time you left, I turned the page and I found all these other notes that we never got to, mainly because Kirby barged in.
It was an organic thing.
Yeah, it was. It flowed. Like Bruce Lee says, be water. Yeah. Right. So I just had a number of things that I wanted to run through if we had the time, like now.
We got time.
It's a beautiful day.
It's not bad.
Weather in Galveston is...
it's muggy.
Yeah, it's hotter than shit outside. I'm impressed and I'm fearful.
Impressed and fearful of what?
The weather.
Why are you impressed?
It's just... to generate that much heat and to cast it upon a place to make things so miserable is impressive. Yeah. But we don't want to be out in it.
No, not right now.
So it's
5 o'clock would be fine.
Yeah, well, we hope so.
But it should. It's almost 3. Well, I don't know if it's almost 3 or not, but it's going to be getting to the hot part of the day. It's 1:40. So.
Right.
Are you recording now?
Well, I am recording.
Oh, okay. So you can just edit this in.
Yeah, I can just pull that.
Do what
back.
you like. Okay.
Or I might just let it run.
You can do what you like.
Be water.
There you go.
All right. So
be lime juice.
The next thing I had on my list was sort of recognizing these sort of times that we live in now where we've got protests and marches all over the country. And again, this is not a political show. We don't get into politics unless it relates directly to the film that we're usually discussing. But I wanted to run a few movies by you. For instance, I asked you in the middle of quarantine, probably within 1 or 2 weeks of the lockdown, and said, hey, when do you want to come over and do Contagion? You were like, are you fucking nuts?
Like, nah, that's not my bag.
No. But have you...
I was too busy reading The Hot Zone.
Oh. No.
That's not true.
Okay. All right. But you've seen Contagion?
I don't believe I have, actually. I know what it is. It's Soderbergh, right, and Gwyneth Paltrow, and Matt Damon, et cetera, but I don't believe I've ever seen it because it's that type of thing has never been my thing that I've tried to, like, the Andromeda Strain and
excellent film.
It's just, but that has never been a subgenre that's ever been appealing to me. I haven't seen, and I don't think I ever will watch, what's the Cabin Fever?
Oh, I haven't seen that either.
Roth. It's just one of those, it's that type of stuff. It just never, so I'm not loving now.
Yeah.
Not that this is Ebola by any stretch of the imagination, but getting that kind of sick kind of creeps me out.
It should creep everybody out.
Yeah, some people find it fascinating. I mean, Contagion was one of the highest rated rentals when all this started going down.
Yeah, it was within a couple of weeks. I saw it creeping up on Vudu, the top 10 at Vudu, and then just during the lockdown,
Right.
all of the month of March, it was the bestseller. I had it on Blu-ray. I think I bought it in January. For our listeners' information, I've actually traveled to China quite a few times. Dave already knows this. And so when I saw what was happening in Wuhan, I was paying attention to it. I was speaking about it with Luke. I was at Half Price Books. I found a copy of Contagion on Blu-ray. I picked it up, and Luke and I watched it, I think, in late January. I'll have to check my letterbox. And Luke was pretty amazed by it. And then, to our amazement, not even a month later, we just saw events play out in real time.
Right.
It was effectively the plot of the film. It was really quite disturbing. So there was that. So you didn't like Outbreak, or did you
Outbreak's
catch
just
that?
a bad movie, right?
Yeah.
But it was one of those, like I said, from a very general standpoint, plague movies have just never been something that, for whatever reason, it's one of those that touches my I don't like it type of things. And so, no, if I've seen Outbreak, it was like when it came on HBO 6 months after it was released in theaters type of thing.
Oh my God. Yeah, 20 years ago, 23 years ago.
Unfortunately, I can't contribute to that.
What about zombie movies?
Man, now I just sound like a guy who doesn't like stuff.
Like 28 Days Later, and
I don't have a problem with them in
just
the
doesn't
same
interest
way.
you?
No, I wouldn't say it doesn't interest me so much as, I guess as I've gotten older, a lot of apocalyptic type of movies interest me less. I found it a lot more interesting and watchable when I was younger. And I guess I've done that reverse thing where the older you get, the more hopeful you get. And, because when you're young, sometimes you're sort of cynical. Because I remember, way back in the day, I had gotten the double VHS cassette tape of Dawn of the Dead and stuff like that. And I did like them. I don't dislike them. It's just one of those that, and also now it's been just so overdone. But, hell, Shaun of the Dead is one of my faves.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that's a zombie movie that, certainly it is, but, I never saw Zombieland, though.
Oh, the first one, I'm the odd man out on Zombieland. Mm-hmm. The first hour is good, and then the minute they walk into Bill Murray's mansion, it just falls apart.
Right.
And it took me out of the world, and I just couldn't go back. And then part 2 was just, it just seemed rather opportunistic.
Well,
which every film is opportunistic.
Just about every sequel.
Sequels are even more.
Very rarely does it make sense from a narrative standpoint.
Yeah.
Well, sometimes it does.
Yeah. Sometimes it does. It did have some interesting.
I'm still waiting on the return to Stand By Me. I think that would make a really compelling follow up.
Oh, especially now.
Yeah, exactly.
Because Corey Feldman needs the work.
Yeah, doesn't he though? Pouring out for Corey Feldman.
His career. In terms of the Black Lives Matter movement, I have not had chance. It just seems so fortuitous that Da 5 Bloods hit Netflix, and of course I haven't seen it yet because I'm a horrible person. But I understand
I don't know if that defines you as a horrible person.
It might be Spike Lee's best film, is what I've been hearing.
I've heard it's quite. Yeah, I haven't watched it either. It's on my to-watch list, but I haven't watched it yet.
Yeah. Oh, if you're going to pick a Spike Lee bin joint out of a bin and watch it, what's your favorite Spike Lee movie?
Oh, it's got to be Do the Right Thing.
Do the Right Thing.
That is just it's an American classic. It is a exceptionally well done movie. It was also one of the ones that I really remember seeing in the theater, right? Because it was obviously full of all sorts of controversy and whatnot when it came out. And at that time, it seemed like film was a lot more adventurous, right? And it certainly was, especially from a major entertainment standpoint. They still make adventurous films now. It's just relegated to VOD or the Netflix or whatever service is out there. You don't have a whole lot of that being broadcasted out in your Cineplexes. Of course, nothing's getting broadcasted on the Cineplexes now, but I think we know what we mean, right?
Right.
But in that time frame, and I don't know if it's the same time, but there was a whole bunch of pretty interesting stuff. You had Spike Lee doing his stuff, and Oliver Stone was doing his, and I don't know the timing between Natural Born Killers and Do the Right Thing. It's probably 5-6 years between the two of them. But in my brain, that still probably was my prime in the theater watching stuff. So you saw a lot of experimental stuff, and Do the Right Thing is probably one that I revisit every 2-3 years.
Oh.
Because it is that good.
Yeah.
You know, if I had to put my top 10, maybe not favorite, but, quote, best movies, that's probably in the top 10.
Wow. Well, I mean, I have to hand it to Spike for really tying in an experience and a cause to something that's so entertaining.
Mm-hmm.
And if I were to choose, I mean, that was 88, right?
It's probably about right. 88, 89, somewhere in that range.
Yeah. And I remember at the time when it came out, and there was like a strangely enough, like a public furor over it.
Oh,
and,
big time.
And when you watch it, you almost you wonder, like, what the hell was that public furor about? Like, there was a bunch of pissed off kids in the ghetto throwing trash cans.
Well, it was all centered around the end, right? When Mookie throws the trash can through the window. And it was one of those where it's pretty ambiguous, right? It isn't really consistent with the character's behavior throughout the vast majority of the film, where he's essentially playing peacemaker as best he can.
Right. But even he can't take it anymore.
Right. And, well, I mean, and that's the thing that's ambiguous. You're not really 100% sure why.
Why does he throw the trash?
Why does he do it, right? And is it Raheem being killed? Undoubtedly, yes, it is. Or the frustration. But it's one of those that you could really interpret it kind of almost however you want.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I think that people could look at that 15 different ways. And I think that it really resonated with a lot of people, especially in the black community. Not that I'm black, and I'm not going to pretend to have insight into anybody's culture. You know, and Lord knows, not all black people's cultures are the same. You know, New York is certainly different than Houston, but it is one of those where I think that resonated with a lot of, you know, peoples.
Well, especially now, because there's a lot of people out there that want to...
A lot of white critics sit there and said, oh, that was, you know, why would he do that?
Yeah.
Right? And I think that was a lot of the furor.
Okay. I mean, it's easy to go back now and to criticize things or have hindsight on things.
Mm-hmm.
And I've never saw it as a controversial film. When I remember seeing it sometime in the early 90s on videotape, and I thought, well, what's the big fuss about? Mookie seemed like he was having a perfectly rational reaction.
Sure.
And the people who were being irrational were the racists. That, to me, is what didn't make a whole lot of sense. Well, so, to me, that's why I didn't understand the controversy about.
I don't know if the people...
I mean, they're upset that their friend is killed. And that's a natural reaction to be upset.
No, I mean, I think... Well, it's also one of those that, you know, you said you saw it several years after the fact, right? So it already existed in the
not in the heat of the moment.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think there is that thing, like, there's a lot of experiences that when it's happening, it's a lot more emotional or visceral than even a couple years later when it's embedded in. And, you know, after a certain period of time,
that's true. Yeah.
And after a certain period of time, it becomes mainstream, right? You're watching it on the videotape, so therefore it's got a certain degree of, you know, general acceptance, right? It's not like some back copy, you know, snuff film that nobody can get their hands on. You know, it's, well, I mean, you take a look at what was the 9 Inch Nails extended video, I think, for Closer, that, you know, for years and years and years you couldn't get.
Yeah,
right?
Or the Madonna video, the erotica video.
Right, and a lot of stuff like that where it's certainly probably has a longer period of controversy because it's inaccessible.
Well, this is kind of where I was heading with this particular conversation with no, that's okay, with Spike, and the fact that it hit in the late 80s, because it seemed like there were very few films that had this much controversy that I remember when I was young. Do the Right Thing was one. Like I remember there were people picketing that movie at my local theater.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't remember that at all. I believe you.
Yeah.
But of course, the other thing was, it's an excellent film, right?
It's an excellent
and people don't generally get that worked up over stuff that sucks, right?
Yeah.
People really gave a shit about, you know, The Last Temptation of Christ.
Well, yes.
And I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that, you know, when you get right down to it, it's a pretty good fucking movie.
Right. So that was the other thing that I was going to bring up. Oh. The Cineplex Odeon on Westheimer, where you and I discovered a few months ago, we probably were at the same night to see Die Hard the opening weekend, just as a matter of consequence, years before we met. I distinctly remember driving by that place, and there were massive protests for The Last Temptation of Christ. Mm-hmm. And if you look at Scorsese's work, not his full body of work, but just how he cares to push things in front of you. And it seems like Lee, now we know that Spike Lee and Martin Scorsese are friends. Right. We know they're buds. And Lee has just gone ad nauseum about how much he really respects Scorsese's mm-hmm. work. And Scorsese will be the first one to push you into a Spike Lee joint. Oh, sure. Really digs the man's work. So they're copacetic. But I just thought as a starting film, something that looks like so much like Scorsese and does the same things that he's trying to do. And these are the two most controversial films of the late 1980s.
I'd probably put that up there for sure.
Right. And I don't remember seeing protesters at a theater until I think it was 2000 or 1999, whenever Dogma came out. That was the next one where people were just out in the streets picketing.
I guess I'm just so unaware, right? Because I can't imagine getting that worked up over anything
over
like that.
A shit monster.
Yeah, it's just, to me, it's absolutely ludicrous that you would do that, right? And that's not making fun of anybody's faith or strength of faith. It's just, it's this empty gesture in my mind. So I don't quite get it. It's more drawing attention to yourself than whatever you're picketing is generally the way I look at it. But okay, go on. I'm sorry.
Well, no, that's all right. It just seemed to be like this moment that wouldn't happen again for a very long time. And it also seemed, as far as the late 80s and the 90s, and where I should say the change of the 70s, the 80s, and the 90s. Mm-hmm. The 70s is the time where everybody says, the inmates had control of the asylum, or rather the budget of the asylum. And you had a deep, heavy, pushy auteur movement, and then that collapsed effectively. People like Coppola will point to Heaven's Gate and say that's it. That's the moment Cimino went 7 times over his budget, and they took it away from us. Wrong. And the junk bond companies bought the studios.
Right. And to quote, Tropic Thunder, I mean, Cimino went full retard.
Right. yeah. Right. Well, I love Year of the Dragon, but that's just a.
Yeah, I mean, he's not an untalented filmmaker.
Yeah.
Right? But it was like, Heaven's Gate. And I've seen it. It's not bad.
Yeah.
It's just you kind of watch and you go, what's all the fuss about?
Right.
Right? I mean, it's not terrible. It's not great.
Yeah.
But it's like, it's okay. It's hard to imagine how it became such the calamity within Hollywood. But they live such a different life than we do.
Sure. And so, but my question to myself was, before Do the Right Thing and The Last Temptation of Christ, what movie before then had been picketed? I mean, I can't think of one.
I'm assuming Guess Who's Coming to Dinner had some people that were not thrilled with it in
because
Deep South.
Sidney Poitier sat down and had dinner with Spencer Tracy.
There's somebody somewhere that's going to get upset about something, right?
Always.
But from a large gathering, picketing, I don't really remember, right? I remember movies that had a bunch of controversy and talking heads and hand-wringing, right? The Natural Born Killers was one I referenced earlier.
Oh,
I remember
yeah, people were upset over that.
Oh, it's going to copycat killers and all that stuff.
And none of it happened.
Well, I think that people tried to tie some events to it, and who knows how consistent they are. I think it's absolutely absurd and ludicrous. But, generally speaking, I can't think of anything. But then again, it's one of those over the past... I think Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom, it wouldn't surprise me at all if there were some people that were picketing it when it came out because of the level of violence and
in a PG movie.
In the PG movie, and Spielberg being America's filmmaker.
It's fucking crazy. If you look at Looker, which is like 3 years before Temple of Doom, and there's naked women and the opening credit sequence, and
right. And I thought Americans were supposed to get a lot more upset about naked women than getting hearts stripped out of chest, but I guess I'm mistaken on that one.
Yeah.
But it's also one of those where Steven Spielberg did make Looker.
Right. Well, that's another thing, and I don't know if you've seen this film has not yet been rated. It's a documentary.
I've heard of it, but
about the rating system and just how just unbelievably unfair and arbitrary it is.
Well, is it? That's interesting.
Yeah, you should give that a watch.
I don't know, because I think lots of times, and I'll watch it for sure, don't get me wrong, but it's one of those where I'm not sure if it ever is really that arbitrary, right? It seems to me, and I may be totally mistaken, you've seen it and I haven't, that the things that really cause problems with rating boards are when things are really well done, right?
Okay.
I mean, I don't know. Greetings. But go on with your thought. I mean, what
well,
did you have to say?
I mean, we all know that there are certain general guidelines like no nudity, one F word. There are certain things like that.
But it is funny because if you look at movies in the late 90s, I mean, Red Dawn, if it came out now, would absolutely be an R-rated flick.
Yeah, and there's very little blood in that.
Oh, see, I remember it being pretty bloody, but I don't recall.
Well, lots of people die, and there's lots of situations that are. I mean, it's combat violence for sure. But as far as
what about the Lady in Red?
Well, the Lady in Red, that was not an R film.
No, that was PG-13.
You're kidding me.
I remember watching it, and then I saw it again
with Kelly LeBrock.
Uh-huh.
That's shocking. That's
it's PG or PG-13.
Any movie with Gene Wilder in his underwear deserves to be an R.
It probably should be NC-17.
Well, yeah, so we almost got into that last night where NC-17 is, we both agreed.
Oh, it's
like
definitely.
Probably half the R movies being released need to be NC-17.
Oh, is it? Is that right? I don't know if I would say that, but I think that... Okay, I'm sorry.
That's all right. Dread needs to be NC-17.
Yeah, it would be much better served if it was... Yeah, it's PG-13, Woman in Red. Woman in Red, not a Lady in Red.
Okay.
But, yeah, I think that NC-17 or something needs to exist.
It's underused.
Yeah, because it's
the mark of death
right?
now since was Henry and June and Showgirls.
Yeah. And then Blockbuster wouldn't carry the videos,
yeah, they wouldn't carry the rating.
Probably amusing to some percentage of your audience. Like, what is this Blockbuster you speak of?
Yeah, no, that's all good. But getting back to the decade change, there's this image of the 1980s now as this sort of stifling art form, stifling the art form of film and cinema.
Right.
And when you look back on that decade and you see films like The Last Temptation of Christ and
Do the Right Thing,
you just wonder, like, really? Is it? The 80s was just such a risk-taking time. More low-budget films were made in the 80s because they had the direct-to-video life.
I think usually when people are talking about that stuff, they're talking about the, mass entertainment, if you will, right? In the 80s, especially the first half, where, the high times of Spielberg and Lucas and all that good stuff. And, yeah, you always had your subversive and more adult fare in there, but you had Top Gun, right? And even Rambo, First Blood Part 2, which was...
The hyper-masculine.
Well, it's kind of guilt-free entertainment, right? It's not asking any deep, challenging philosophical questions, which you don't need all the time. But I think that's generally when people qualify that they're hoping for, desiring that. Because the 70s certainly had a lot more moral ambiguity in his movies.
Sure.
At least that's our memory of it, right?
No, I would go with that.
So, and I think the 90s probably bounced more to the 70s, and the 2010s are probably much more like the 80s with the advent and dominance of the superhero flicks. Because even Deadpool it's kind of faux.
Yeah,
edgy,
that's subversive.
Right? Well, it is, but it's also very toothless, right? It's entertaining, but it's kind of sophomoric, not more. Yeah. That's not kind of.
It's more juvenile.
Absolutely, it's very juvenile, but it's also one of those where it's not asking deep, probing questions about the morality of, watching this, and that's fine, right? It's still a pretty vanilla theme, even though it's just presented in this kind of outrageous package.
Yeah, I'll go with that. So. I mean, we're not being as challenging to ourselves as an audience by the films that we're making, is what you're saying.
Well, I don't know if it's that so much as, but when you're talking about the 80s, having this perception, I think that people look at things like that, and that's how they're kind of defining those eras.
Yeah.
I'm just going off on a tangent. Sorry.
No, I think that's true.
And I don't think that's, I don't think it's one of those things where that type of thought is accurate, because you can always find outliers and exceptions. I mean, The Dark Knight Returns is much more adult.
Yes.
That's actually a pretty adult, or mature, or however you want to put it. And, there's a certain degree of sophistication and complexity that isn't in the other ones.
Sure.
It's not, the
and the
deepest movie of
Watchmen.
all time, but, yeah, Watchmen's a good example. I don't know if they're successful or not, but they're trying.
Yeah. But all those kind of hit at the same time. V for Vendetta.
Sure seems like it.
Yeah. And No, I agree that first decade after 2000, the aughts or whatever we call it, that was more like a return to the 80s in terms of those film stuff. I mean, the 90s.
Oh, I think the 90s were exceptional. Obviously, I'm going to be biased.
You thought they were exceptional filmmaking?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, but there were people other than Tarantino making movies.
Exactly.
That's what I like to remind everybody.
Oh, absolutely.
I never found it that exceptional. Like
Really?
compared to the 80s and compared to the aughts, I didn't think it was.
Really?
It really didn't kick in until 99.
Okay.
I thought that was sort of ringing. And like, I'll have to go back and find the highs and lows.
Right. I bet you.
And not looking at an Oscar list.
Well, yeah,
looking
of
at a
course.
production list.
Right. But I think there was. I mean, I might be mistaken, but I mean, if you just take the whole Tarantino out of right.
Yeah.
I mean, because that's including him and all of his, acolytes, right?
Well, indie cinema.
But I mean,
And the Coens and Fargo winning Best
That's
Picture.
why I wouldn't take that out, right? I'm talking about strictly the Tarantino group, subgenre, which, he's phenomenal, right? And he spawned who knows how many copycats.
Oh, yeah, 2 Days in the Valley.
Yeah, 11 of 45. Is that what it was?
Yeah.
But things that were of various degrees of success. But then you
Buffalo
had,
66.
Right, but you had Linklater coming out. You had Rodriguez coming out. And I don't know if I'm a huge fan of Rodriguez, but I certainly admire what he was doing back then.
Oh, absolutely.
And Kevin Smith, another guy who's, okay, it didn't age all that well, but it's like, oh, it's definitely different. And, when did Seven come out? Late
That was
90s?
94.
Okay, so I think you did have a lot of things then that were a lot more, generally accepted as interesting relative to, say.
That's a good point. Let me bring up the year.
I mean, JFK was the 90s, wasn't it?
Yeah, that was 90.
Okay, I'm sorry.
That's all right.
I'm rambling.
I mean, at some point, we're going to have to take a deep dive into the career of Oliver Stone.
I don't know if we need to, but okay, let's.
Sean Fennessy did an episode of the Big Picture podcast last week. That
Fennessy and Dobbins, they did fine.
It would make anything that we say irrelevant. It was
right.
It was a fantastic episode.
Yes, although Amanda Dobbins didn't bring as much to the table as I would like, but that's fine.
Yeah.
Although I really had a problem with Sean Fennessy's equating Eric Bogosian's character in talk radio with what he qualified as the angry radio of today, being Joe Rogan and Ben Shapiro, making me wonder, it's like, have you ever heard either of those two people?
No, I don't equate those at all.
Yeah, I found that a very unusual thing to say with kind of a...
That is kind of... I don't know. I like talk radio. I like Eric Bogosian as an actor. It's kind of disappointing what happened to his career compared to what he just went out guns blazing in that first film.
Right.
Because that was his play, if I remember correctly.
Yeah.
Right? He wrote that play, and then he directed himself in it. Like, it was a one-man
I think that's right, yeah.
bottle play. And after that, he was like the villain in Under Siege 2 on a train or something. Like
I always kind of get the sense he was in control of his own career. I bet you $20 he took the Under Siege 2. It was like, well, what do I have to do? And how much are you going to pay me?
Right.
Done.
Yeah.
Okay, but once again, I kind of hijacked your original point. Oliver Stone, deep dive.
Yeah, we'll have to do that some other time when it's not so obviously right next to Sean Fennessy's episode, which I recommend everybody listen to.
Absolutely.
But just we should take 1964, 1974, 1984, 1994. We should do. I will do that. I will make a list because in 1984 alone.
Okay. Something tells me it's going to be a mind blower.
I can't. We talked before about that podcast called "The 80s All Over," which was Patreon supported, so they never finished it. I think it runs from 80 to 85 and it quits. But this is 1984. Amadeus, which won Best Picture.
Right.
That's the least impressive film on this short list. Right. Temple of Doom, Buckaroo Banzai, Beverly Hills Cop, The Ice Pirates, which I know you're going to snicker at.
Oh, come on. I saw it at the drive-in. It was so
good.
Okay. I don't know.
Johnny Dangerously, The Killing Fields, The Last Starfighter, Nausicaa, The Valley of the Wind, Once Upon a Time in America, Purple Hearts, The Razor's Edge, Romancing the Stone, Splash, 16 Candles, The Terminator. That's an impressive list for any year.
Well, it's It's ironic in that I actually found that, when you're going through it, it was definitely peaks and valleys, right? Some of which you and I will find personally satisfying movies, right?
Sure.
That would be objectively qualified as trash. Irish Pirates, my friend, would certainly qualify.
You're not into space herpes?
I personally speaking, I am not. But it's one of those, I guarantee you show someone now. I mean, if you showed your son that, have you shown your son that?
Yes.
And he liked it?
Oh, both feet in the water, buddy.
Maybe I'd have to recalibrate my perception.
John McTusick and Angelica Houston and Robert Urich, there's not much to dislike about.
It's amazing. Okay.
Ron Perlman.
But, I mean, yes, it is a... Do you have a list of any of the other, like the 74 or...
No, 94? I'm going to have to do that. I think for the next episode, we're going to do that. So, my point was I just don't... I mean, sometimes... I don't know if you're going to have that many good films in all of the 1960s.
Oh, you will. Absolutely. You absolutely will.
I'm just remembering the dogs.
You're talking about the
entire decade.
You're talking about the entire decade?
Yeah.
I mean, when you have Bonnie and Clyde and Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid and The Great Escape and...
Yeah, I like The Great Escape.
How many David Lean movies came out in this? When was Lawrence of Arabia?
3. That's 62.
Yeah, I mean... So, yeah.
Dr. Zhivago, which is like one of the...
Good, the Bad, and the Ugly.
Yeah.
I mean, not even getting into international cinema and French New Wave and all that stuff. Just keeping it strictly...
Yeah. Sanjuro being 60, I think.
Yeah, I mean, just being strictly American. I think the 60s, especially the later part of it. I mean, Easy Rider is trash, but it was an incredibly important movie.
Yeah, for what it did, for everything. Okay. So I'm going to have to go back and do research on that for sure for the next one.
Now, unfortunately, I'm afraid that it's going to be one of those that when we look at 64, 74, 84, and 94, 84 may be the least impressive of that.
Really?
I think there's a legitimate chance it might be. I think, I suspect, I will almost bet you $10 on it.
Okay. We'll have to do that. I'll have to do that. I'll put together a list and we'll go year by year. I mean, I'm willing to bet that, say, 1944 is a lot more interesting than 1954. We'll have to see.
We'll have to see.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that wraps up pretty much point one.
Okay.
I finally watched The Curious Case of Benjamin Button.
Okay. I'd be interested in hearing your thoughts on this one.
And we got into a Fincher discussion a few episodes ago, and you said that was your least favorite Fincher film.
Well, no, it's not my least favorite Fincher film. Alien 3.
Alien 3. But we excluded that.
Okay, yeah, if that is excluded, then it is my
the next one
least
is
favorite.
Button. Yeah. Okay. What did you not like about it?
I just, I only saw it one time in the theater, and it was the only Fincher movie that I recall seeing being underwhelmed by and not totally gripped by. It certainly moves at a more languid pace, and is it one of those where I'm viewing it through the same lenses that when I saw Jackie Brown, right, where I had an expectation for X and I got Y, and since I really wanted X, I couldn't appreciate Y. I admit that's a definite possibility. Is it one of those where, how long did that come out? 15 years now?
It was 2008.
Okay, so...
I'm sorry, 2006. It was before Zodiac. It was after Panic Room.
Okay, so it's one of those that I would imagine that if I saw it now, I would remember it more, favorably, or I'd look on it more favorably.
Okay.
Did you lose?
I lost my headphones, but I'm still recording. Go ahead.
Okay. But okay, go on. Then yeah, it's the one that I have the least interest in revisiting. I mean, I've got no strong desire to watch it again.
But you haven't seen it since 2006,
right? I mean, I'll see Gone Girl again for sure, or
really
Panic Room, or yeah.
Luke and I watched Panic Room about 3 weeks ago. That still holds up.
It's a tight, taut thriller. But I just remember it being. I remember the visual effects being shockingly good, right? I remember the basic story being interesting, but I just remember it was the first one, maybe only one I've ever seen that I considered kind of dull.
Huh.
Reserving the right to be wrong. I mean, admitted that I hadn't seen it since it came out.
Okay.
What'd you think?
Well,
I can kind of guess.
Yeah, well, I thought that it was extremely powerful.
Uh-huh.
I see a lot of Kubrickian point making with Fincher in terms of him hitting you over the head of something that's really so obvious that a lot of times the audience will miss it. You know, the floating pin being one of those primary examples in 2001 where the floating pin was supposed to represent the fact that man is not in control of these things in outer space, that he's got to create an environment in order to exist out here.
Yeah, I thought it was just a cool transmission to go into the spaceship, but okay, go on.
Right, yeah, well that's what I thought my initial viewing too, but it's just so fairly obvious to everyone that man is not in control of his circumstances that why would you think for any extra second on the floating pin? But that was Kubrick's long drawn out point on that topic. And then there's the conclusionary step that he wants you to take when you're standing in the crater and the monolith is there and man takes a photo of it, because that's what man does in that circumstance, is he takes photos of things that are neat. And he might as well have brought his Hawaiian shirt to the moon, you know, that type of situation. And not everyone can make that conclusionary step. And that's fine. I saw Benjamin Button as Fincher's kind of, if I were to describe it as anything, perhaps his ode to love.
Okay.
And his ode to life. And
yeah, I mean, sure. Yeah, that seems fair and reasonable for sure.
And that seems fairly obvious to state given the context of the film, but I thought that he went through great lengths of just painstakingly planning out very specific sequences to show you the great challenge of what it was for this man to go through this reverse life. Mm-hmm. And I greatly appreciated the man being 70, but mentally he's 10. And then the reverse, mm-hmm. right? Like chronologically he's 70, but physically he's 10.
Right.
And I thought that reverse flow was actually quite ingenious. I mean, obviously Fincher didn't write the film, but just the way that he conveyed it, particularly with Cate Blanchett, I thought it was very, very well done.
But did you like it?
Oh, I loved it.
Okay.
I loved it. I watched it again immediately.
Okay. Now, I remember Nicole liked it a lot.
Yeah.
Right? So I'm not saying that y'all haven't gotten more of it. Like I said, it's very much one of those things where I had a certain level of expectation where that's on me more than the film itself.
Well, yeah, you can really. That's why I like going in with no expectation. But it was also one of the reasons why it sat on my shelf for so long, because how do you follow up something like Panic Room?
Right.
You know, and that was a lot of people's problems with Fight Club was, you know, they waited and waited and waited after 7, and then that Fight Club happened, and they just weren't along for the ride.
You don't think so?
Well, in between that and that fucking bitch Rosie O'Donnell ruining the ending on live TV the day of the premiere.
Yeah, I don't know. I think it's just one of those movies where there is absolutely zero way it could have been a ginormous blockbuster.
You think Fight Club didn't have a chance?
I don't think it had a chance. I mean, I am so glad they made it.
Yeah.
But it's just one of those you look at and it's like, why would you think that would be a huge blockbuster? I mean, it's nihilistic. It's a total acid trip. It's confusing. It doesn't make you feel, quote, good, if you will, right? I mean, it's a hell of a movie. But, I mean, having an expectation that it'd be this huge thing, I don't know if that's even close to realistic.
It seemed so epic at the time.
Oh, and it is. But your parents aren't going to be interested.
No, they were not.
And that's the way you have blockbusters, right? Is it's multicultural, multi-generational. I mean, it's a pretty specific audience that wanted to see Fight Club. And, you know, we're looking at each other and we're it.
We're the audience.
It's like, you guys are your early to mid-20s, and it turns out you're white. Yeah, you're the group.
Okay. Name a movie that you saw lately that you want to rave about.
Oh, geez. I think there's been a couple. I haven't watched a whole lot of recent movies. I was pretty lucky in that I was able to Shanghai my daughter into watching a couple movies that I really enjoy. And so I'm not really answering your question. Well, I guess I kind of am. What did I watch recently?
Well, I checked your letterbox.
Yeah, so I watched Bringing Up Baby, and I watched Singing in the Rain back to back on the same night. Those are absolute classics, and I still find them as modern as anything that comes out now. And I mean, I've on my letterbox I keep saying HBO Max because I'm kind of addicted to it right now because their library of classic films is remarkable. You know, I saw Adam's Rib, which I'd never seen before, and that is excellent.
Spencer Tracy, Katharine Hepburn.
And it is tremendous. I mean, that is a fascinating movie, and I would recommend anybody watch it. It is. Have you seen it yet?
No, not yet.
I think it leaves at the end of this month.
Oh, I got to.
So I would recommend doing that. I've seen, all sorts of great movies. I wasn't expecting that question, so I'm kind of brain locked right now.
Yeah,
but
we also saw Spielberg.
I saw Spielberg. I liked the first half of Spielberg a lot.
Yeah,
you know, I find that generally much more interesting. You know, the film Bratz movement and that whole, and just observing that they, collaborated and worked together, I find really exciting because those are some exceptional talents, and having them together like that is it was a delight. The rest of it, I didn't find it satisfying, but I still found it good.
Yeah,
right. It was funny. My daughter was also watching that kind of half, and she was just amazed. Like, oh, I didn't realize he made all those, and made me really reappreciate Spielberg for sure.
Oh, she didn't realize it.
No, because it's one of those that so many of his movies are verifiable classics, right?
Oh yeah.
And
pause.
It's like I don't know what's going on here. Okay, so we've got this all.
Do we need to lock it?
Hang on. Yeah. I just need to slouch, as it turns out.
Hey, slouching is good.
Slouching is not great.
So, can you give me an example of one that she was like, oh, wow, I didn't know he made that?
Well, she doesn't pay attention to credits, right? So she didn't realize that. I mean, she knew his name, and I think she probably had correlated E.T. and maybe like Jaws or something, or Jurassic Park, I think. But it's like, the Indiana Jones and Close Encounters and Schindler's List and Saving Private Ryan and Color Purple and just all these movies that, for the most part, are still in the public conscience. At least people know the names. And to a certain degree, know the movie even if they've never seen it. Yeah. So I think she was just astounded that he was the guy with all of those. So, I mean, it did make me reappreciate it. Or, basically...
Reappreciate him.
Reappreciate him. And it's going to... He's probably... I mean, he should be remembered as, what would you say, top 3 filmmakers of all time?
He has to be.
I mean, it's hard to argue.
He has to be.
Yeah, even his ones that weren't as successful are still generally pretty darn good.
Only 2 of his films have not made money.
Yeah, but I don't know if that's, I mean, how many of them would you say you just don't like? I mean, I can say that about Hook. I don't like Hook.
Yeah,
1941's not great.
Well, that's not great. But I mean, I can't tell you how many times, particularly when I was a kid, that I've seen 1941, and it never bothered me. Yeah, I never turned it off.
It's not terrible. I mean, Hook's it's not a success.
Right.
I don't know. Oh, yeah, she didn't know like Ready Player One, which I don't know if that's a huge success, but there are parts of it that are tremendous.
It made a huge splash and made a lot of money when it came out. It was a successful film.
Right, but just a successful narrative, right? Was it a compelling...
I thought that it was a compelling story. Well, I think a lot of people, I don't want to say elitists, whatever that means, but there are a lot of haute couture people who didn't
But that's kind of the
cash
story
in on it.
Isn't that kind of the story of Spielberg's career? Is everybody would look down on him? It's like... Yeah,
and I thought the documentary Spielberg really went into that.
Right. Now, and if you look at it, the things that he's made are perfect. I mean, not everything he's made is perfect, but the ones that he did, it's like, shit, his highs are about as high as anybody, period.
Yeah.
I mean, Raiders. That movie is a perfect movie.
Yeah. Raiders is a perfect movie.
Jaws is a perfect movie.
Jaws is a perfect movie.
I mean...
I wouldn't change anything in Temple of Doom. No. I saw that on the big screen about a month ago, and I love it.
Schindler's List, Jurassic Park. I mean...
Schindler's List is pretty perfect.
Same year.
Yeah.
Saving Private Ryan. It's not perfect. I know there's a lot of people that are extremely critical of it, but I think they're just trying to be cooler than thou hipsters myself.
Yeah.
That's the scariest movie I've ever seen in my life.
Yeah, that's a horror show. And I know there are a lot of people that are upset about the morality of it, of, you know, this guy who doesn't get to choose to be saved and so forth, and he's got all this moral weight that's placed on him by others. And, you know, I get that, but there was nothing in that war was fair to anyone.
Well, war, generally speaking, isn't.
War, generally speaking, is not. So, I mean, you know, as far as like a Quebecian point, that's it. Yeah, if you don't like that, then you shouldn't like war.
But isn't the point of the movie is this is the closest simulation to war that we can present in this, you know. Yeah. I mean, that's kind of what it was.
He did a fantastic job of it. The other thing in Spielberg that I found extraordinarily profound, and if I were to pin everything on, you must see this documentary for this one point. It's that one point that Kathleen Kennedy was describing, being in that room at ILM with Dennis Muren and Frank Marshall, and I think Phil Tippett was there.
And they were talking about using the computers?
Yes, and how everyone had the exact same reaction. And then one of the screenwriters said it was seeing that dinosaur run on screen was the equivalent of sound.
Yeah, no, yeah, I don't remember who said that, but I remember that moment myself. Yeah,
and
it's pretty.
And he said, "I'm not exagerating."
Yeah,
like everyone thinks that I'm exaggerating, but I am not exaggerating.
So I remember walking out of that movie, just agog, just like I cannot believe what I just saw. Yeah, I remember seeing that as well, saying, "Yeah, that's a pretty apt description."
Yeah, we're not talking about Tron.
No, we're not talking about Tron. It's like, oh yeah, no, now we believe it. Now we buy it.
Yeah, I saw Jurassic Park in the cinema. I am not a Jurassic Park fan.
Really?
Yeah.
You're not a Jurassic Park? Really?
I've never been along for that ride. I'm the odd man out. Like I don't.
That is
again. It's not a bad film.
Right.
I will recognize the greatness of the film.
Just doesn't grab you.
It just as a story, as a narrative, I was not in that bracket of whatever. I was not in that audience. That's perfectly fine. But even I, in that theater, looked up at those dinosaurs running across the screen in a completely 3D motion, and just thought, "Holy shit! How did they do that?"
It's like, oh my god, they made dinosaurs.
I cannot believe. I mean, you're talking about just 15 years after full-size banthas were being shown very far in the distance off screen, not off screen, on screen, to that, and the problems, for instance, of having with the shark. I found that argument compelling. Like, I'm not getting into another shark situation.
Yeah,
right. I will do anything that I have to do.
Not going to do the shark
to not have to deal with Bruce again. So I thought that was a profound moment in the. The documentary.
It was a pretty good documentary. It really was.
What was did you like that whole sequence on his later career, last 10, 20 years? It kind of dragged a little bit.
Well, it just wasn't as much, because I think a lot of those movies just aren't as successful to me, successful to me personally, although they're still pretty good. Like Minority Report, I don't have any desire to go back and revisit it. But something tells me if I did, I would like going, damn, that was pretty freaking good. You know, Catch Me If You Can is a good movie, but it was one of those where I wasn't seeing it at the right time in my life, right? Because, you know, the movies you see between the ages of, 8 and 28 are kind of the ones that oftentimes stick with you. It's not all that different than music, right? Because the music you like from a general perspective is defined in a certain limited number of years. You know, I don't know what it is, 15 to 25.
Possibly.
And before then, you're not listening to your own stuff. And then after that, you're like only listening to your stuff, and you define your stuff in that general 10-year period. So I think that with a lot of those movies, it's like, it's just not as personal to me, personally. But it is one of those where they're definitely excellent films. I mean, Lincoln's an excellent film.
Yeah.
Right?
I find
it just doesn't excite me as much as like, oh, I'm going to watch this again.
I find Lincoln. Things are a little bit different. You know, I'm a history geek,
right?
But I found Lincoln just extraordinary, scene by scene, and Daniel Day-Lewis and his whole breakdown of that character. I've never seen. I think the closest you could get to actually the real person that we all grew up being told, at least, that you should worship.
Kind of like the dinosaurs in Jurassic Park.
Kind of like, the dinosaurs in Jurassic Park. But even the guy who plays Gideon Wells, who's in this cabinet, which we've seen in a million things, whose name is escaping me. Sam Waterston is playing Seward. And, I was raised since birth to hate Seward, just from a historical context. And Sally Field just absolutely kills as Mary Todd Lincoln, and all the craziness and the horror that woman had to go through, losing her husband, losing a child, losing her husband, losing another child. I thought she delivered that pain on screen greatly, and then how effectively her husband just had no time for her. He had no time for her. He had a civil war. He had slavery.
He was preoccupied.
He just could not spare a moment for his wife.
We should probably tear down that statue of him.
Wow.
He just didn't have priorities.
You went there.
Kind of have to these days.
But
it's one of those where I do think that, 50 years from now, the second half of his career is going to be really well recognized.
I hope so.
And probably there is going to be that think piece that somebody puts out there that's the important stuff.
Right.
And they're not going to be necessarily wrong, right?
Right. So let's jump off the deep end into another controversial moment here, since you mentioned HBO Max.
That's not controversial.
I love HBO Max too. I've spent a lot of time on it in the past month.
Yeah.
And when's the last time you saw Gone with the Wind?
Oh gosh, I was but a young lad, younger than 13, maybe 9. I mean, that's what, a 4-hour-long movie?
Yeah.
3 hours and 45 minutes. And that's basically what I remember, is that this is a long freaking movie.
Yeah.
Clark Gable's pretty cool. This is a long freaking movie.
And that was another one of those films where that was another one of those films where going back to that moment with the dinosaur on the TV screen. And everyone's saying, "Oh my God!" and this is going to change cinema. And this is just like the introduction of sound, which for our listeners, I'm sure all know, is Al Jolson's The Jazz Singer in 1930, I believe. But the advent of Technicolor and the use of Technicolor in Gone with the Wind and The Wizard of Oz.
Yeah.
When I believe The Wizard of Oz got an Oscar. That was like a special technical achievement
I think they did too. That sounds right.
Just for the color used in that film.
Yeah. And the special effects. I mean, it's
The Wizard of Oz.
Yeah.
It's shockingly good for 1939.
Yeah.
It's shockingly good. My wife was always a huge fan, and she always tried to get me to watch it. And I think we lived in Canada. It might have been 2014, 2013 before I saw it. And we saw it on a I guess it was an 85-inch screen in our living room, and I was putting up with it until that boom shot where they start trotting down the yellow brick road, and the entire entourage is behind them, and the entire town is marching towards the camera. I was floored. And I could imagine seeing that on the screen in 1939.
There's usually a reason why the classics are classics.
That would be a reason why.
It's just one of those that, King Kong, watched that recently. And it's really good.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not as good as I remember, but it's still really good.
Yeah, it still holds up.
Yeah, and have you seen that recently?
Not recently. I've got the King Kong Laserdisc, the Criterion.
Shockingly violent.
Yeah.
It is shockingly violent.
Was that pre-code?
I believe it was.
Yeah.
Okay, but going on. I know that wasn't the point. So Gone with the Wind.
So
when was the last time I said it? I haven't seen it in forever plus a day.
Yeah, so it was pulled off of HBO Max because
completely
of the
absurd. I'm right up there with Spike on that one.
Did Spike say that?
Oh, Spike thought it was ridiculous.
Awesome.
He said that should be shown. He said that was the D.W. Griffith one that's escaping me?
The Birth of a Nation.
Birth of a Nation should be shown. And obviously, Twitter culture freaked out and he had to backtrack, right? But, yeah.
Spike had to backtrack?
Yeah, especially with the Birth of a Nation. But I don't think he's wrong, right? These things should absolutely not be gotten rid of.
We watched Birth of a Nation in film school. Mm-hmm. That was... You had to see that.
Yeah, and I think that...
And
from a technical standpoint, you absolutely have to, right?
Absolutely.
But I mean, okay, but go on.
Well, it was just so important to understand the early days of cinema, first of all, and everything good and bad that entailed. How he just whitewashed the Klan.
Right.
And the Klan's role in the film is an important part of our history.
When you're watching that movie in film class, you're not looking at it through, looking for that stuff, right? You're looking for, okay, how is this mechanically done? Mm-hmm. This is a good narrative. Why is it a good narrative? Right? Why is it effective, if you will? Mm-hmm. Right? This is an emotional movie. Why is it emotional? It's, that type of stuff oftentimes, at least it's been my experience, is kind of the nuts and bolts of stuff.
Right. Well, but it's both.
Right.
We went through both.
Okay.
There was the technical aspect of what he was doing and how groundbreaking it was, and that was paired with he used that to promote this agenda, mm-hmm. which was damaging to our society.
Yes, but didn't he also rebound pretty well from that? What was his?
He rebounded with Intolerance.
Intolerance, right.
But Intolerance didn't do as well as A Birth of a Nation.
But from that moral perspective.
Well, from his perspective, you make a movie about the Klan, you're making a movie about the Klan, and he was excusing their behavior.
Right.
I would give Gone with the Wind much higher marks, considering David O. Selznick actually tried very hard to, I wouldn't say whitewash, but change a lot of what was in Gone with the Wind to tone it down mm-hmm. in terms of its racism so that it was less offensive. And, you can argue at that point or not. HBO Max actually has, if you choose Gone with the Wind on HBO Max, since they've reposted it, there's some fantastic addendums that go along with it.
Right.
Some interviews and like an introduction given by this historian to put it into context for you. And I would advise anyone to watch those before they actually watched Gone with the Wind. Like, for instance, when Leslie Howard and Clark Gable go out trying to defend Scarlett's honor, in the book, and I read the book as part of a literature class when I was in my undergrad, they are the Knights of the White Camellia. They are the Klan. Mm-hmm. Those Southern gents, aristocratic gents, they are the Klan when they're going out and burning shit and crosses and everything. And in the movie, that is entirely taken out. The Klan is not even mentioned in Gone with the Wind.
Right.
And they made it more Scarlet focused. Mm-hmm. And I thought that was an important part, not just for toning down the racism, but also to bring the story more on focus.
Right.
And it focused more on the plot and the narrative.
Yeah, when you got a 3 hour and 45-minute movie, you got to streamline it as much as you can.
Right. You would hope.
But it was one of those, I found the whole pulling of the movie off the service very troubling.
Right? No, I didn't like that at all. I thought that was a chicken shit move on HBO's part. I understand why they did it, and when they pulled it off, they also announced that they were going to put it back within. We're getting laughed at. Yeah, that's perfectly fine.
We're very important people, hon.
When they pulled it off of HBO Max, they immediately announced that we're going to put it back, and we're going to put it back with context. But we can still buy Triumph of the Will, and we can still buy Olympia.
But you can't buy a Song of the South.
No, you can't, and that's wrong.
I tend to think it is.
I find that a crime against our history as a nation to not have Song of the South.
I don't know if I get
on
that
the show,
but I understand your point.
I would.
It's really no different than banning books. It's literally no different.
No medium should be banned in this country.
And not very much is. And also, Song of the South is not banned.
No, Disney refuses to issue it,
and that's they own
it. That's the de facto banned. That's their right as the producer of that film.
When will their copyright expire? And it become part of the
public
domain?
It was 1949, right?
And I know that the public domain...
70 years after 1949, so that's coming up in a few years.
So what happens then when it becomes part of the public domain?
Then the same thing that happened to The Stranger.
What I'm asking is, what do you think is going to happen?
It's going to be the illegal proliferate, not illegal, but it's going to be the mass proliferation of that film. Mm-hmm. And the interpretation of it for their own political needs.
Right. But it's just one of those questions. I wonder if all of a sudden, let's say in 30 years if all of a sudden it is readily available, as opposed to impossible to get right now. I just wonder.
That's a good point.
Just for your general audience. Because I saw that movie in the theaters. I'm not that old.
It on the re-release.
It came out on a re-release. Early 80s?
Yeah. I think it was 83.
And certainly I wasn't looking at it through any perspective. I remember it being reasonably entertaining. I don't remember it being that great, to be honest with you. But...
So my wife, fun fact, is a descendant of Joel Chandler Harris, the author of
about to say that must
Uncle
be the
Remus
author,
stories.
Okay.
And
Brer Rabbit and all that.
Right. And Harris, for those who don't know, grew up and worked on a real antebellum plantation, and found it very fascinating, all these stories he was being told. And when slavery was done away with, he grew into an adult, and he missed all of these inflections from the African American population, and he chose to write them down in his own way and in his own style, which a lot of people today find very offensive. Certainly at the time he did it, he thought that he was preserving these stories.
Well, if it's one of those where it's an accurate representation of how that very specific...
To him at that time. Yeah, absolutely.
I don't know if that's offensive or not.
Well,
I don't think it's offensive.
Well, we live in an outrage culture. Someone's going to find something offensive.
Well, absolutely.
This table is offensive to me.
Thing.
Yeah, I can't believe they painted this table white.
Right.
Fuck those people. It's that type of situation.
No, understood.
But I don't think that film should be banned. If anything, that film, just like Triumph of the Will, just like Gone with the Wind, just like Birth of a Nation, that film should be available, and it should be watched. It should be studied.
Yeah, but I'm just glad that it isn't one of those things where there is a governmental ban on that.
Right. No, the government of the United States should not be in the business of banning anything.
And I'm sure that they have, and there'll be probably a zillion people who point things out. I can't remember any else.
Well, the Anarchist Cookbook is available for $15.99 on Amazon.com. If you can still buy that damn thing, you should be able to buy Song of the South.
I tend to agree. But, again, it is one of those where Disney owns it. Disney can do it if they see fit.
It's very disappointing for Disney. They can do exactly what Yad Vashem did with Triumph of the Will, which is put that thing on a black cover. Mm-hmm. And they put a swastika on it, and they put this disclaimer on the back, and they said this film needs to be shown in context, and it's got a commentary track with a historian walking you through scene by scene on it. I think that's what they need to have a Song of the South and Gone with the Wind, and
sure.
And every film
then you can do it with every single film ever made.
Yeah, just like we do.
Yeah,
for sure. That's perfectly fine.
You know we've advanced as a society when these are the things that's stopping us in our tracks. I'm not really joking.
No, that's perfect. Yeah, we can't go there because ... and we'll make up whatever reason that we want to make up. Just like Birth of a Nation, what really pisses me off specifically about the de facto ban was that Song of the South is so technically important.
Yeah.
20 years later, they're making Mary Poppins. And Disney's like, how the hell did we do this? And they pull Song of the South out so they can study how they broke the technological barrier in the 40s. Mm-hmm. That's amazing to me.
Yeah.
And it was also one of these situations where Disney was bankrolling his entire company and the future of the company's existence on one film, just like he'd done with Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. And it paid off huge. It paid off big time. Not that there wasn't controversy with it, right? So I think Disney needs to face these things. Warner Brothers has done very good to label all of their cartoons from the 40s and 50s as these need to be seen in context. Mm-hmm. And they're racist caricatures.
I find it silly that we have to put that declaration on there.
I think you have to.
Why? It's from the 1940s.
Right, but you take Song of the South and you put it in your car when you're driving your 4- and 5-year-olds to daycare. They're seeing those racist stereotypes.
Isn't that on the parent or the...
Well, it is, and I completely understand that point. But I still think loud bangs in the kitchen need to be banned.
I don't know. It's just one of those. I just find it very strange. It's kind of just... I mean, it's obvious stuff to me. That's like, why do we have... It's like,
Well, we're libertarians.
Raging Bull's a movie that came out, and it's not like you have to have somebody telling you, okay, he is not somebody you want to emulate.
Yeah, don't beat up your wife.
It's it's kind of obvious stuff, right?
It should be obvious to people who use their brains.
Right.
Right.
And we kind of sell everybody short. We market to this lowest common denominator. I mean, it's just frustrating. It's the same thing where we have, people who always freak out about, not always, back in the day, they would freak out about violent video games or satanic music. It's not like you have to issue an Iron Maiden album saying, this is not reality, this is entertainment.
So the parental advisory explicit lyrics label on a CD.
Which caused everybody to freak out.
Yeah. Not worth it.
No, it's dumb. Well, that is different. That's more of a rating, right? It's not a...
Just like a film rating.
It's not an explanation of why it's not valid. So let me retract my previous exclamation. It's not dumb. It makes sense, right? If you're a parent, you're in charge of, vetting what your children consume, right? But it's not... They are putting a rating out there. They're saying that this has mature elements and themes. But it's not sitting there saying, being a Satanist is evil, right? The guys in Black Sabbath weren't really doing that. It's just one of those that there's a difference between a rating that says, okay, look, this is the general contents versus having to explain it that, well, obviously, this is wrong. You don't call people these things. You don't behave. It's just, I don't like it when other people are my parents. I barely like it when my parents parent me.
Yeah. We have very libertarian backgrounds.
Well,
and we don't like people.
Yeah,
people don't like we don't like people telling us what to do,
right?
How to raise our kids, what to watch, what to read,
what to drink.
Yeah. F those people.
Yeah, which they mind their own business.
I can make my own determinations.
Right. I mean, if you want
watching Song of the South,
I think it makes some. Yeah, it makes some sense. You can definitely say, okay, this has bad language, what we consider bad language now, or whatever. Not that they had bad language in that movie. I don't know. It's just one of those that I find it.
We don't need the government or Disney or Twitter telling us what to watch and what not to watch.
Or what's not okay to watch.
Right. Yeah.
And that's kind of, I guess, more of it than anything.
Valid point. This is going to be a shorter episode.
Well, yeah, people are starting to stir.
No, it's just we're reaching the end of the questionnaire. What's a dad movie?
What's a dad movie? Do you want me to give you examples of a dad movie or define it?
I'd like you to try to define it if you can. If not, go ahead and just throw one out there. I have one as an example, but I'm not sure that it would meet a definition that you would come up with.
I don't know. I've never given it a whole amount of thought. A dad movie would be something that... Okay, I want to hear what you're going to say.
Well, just opening up, Ford v. Ferrari.
Definitely a dad movie.
That's a dad movie.
Right.
And I want to say that probably most racing films are dad movies.
Yeah, I would say so.
Even Fast and the Furious, the first one.
Yeah.
The others just seem kind of ludicrous to me.
I don't know. I think the one where they drive... I can't remember it because it's number 5, 7, or 15. I'm not sure. The one where they're driving through Brazil with the bank on the back. I think that's an ultimate dad movie. Ultimate dad movie.
No.
Yes, it absolutely is.
That's ridiculousness. That's
oftentimes
silliness.
A dad movie is ridiculous. They're inherently sort of silly. That doesn't mean they're bad.
I don't think the dad movies are kind of silly. That's
well,
not true.
Depending on your perspective, right? Is Field of Dreams a dad movie?
Yes.
Is it kind of ridiculous?
I see your point.
Just depending on how you're looking at it, right?
Right.
I think a dad movie is anything that has more or less it's earnest, right? It is got a fairly straightforward definition of right and wrong. It's got oftentimes the characters are on some kind of quest or mission. They are kind of following your general Joseph Campbell hero's journey type of thing. At least it could be classified as that. And it's one of those that at the end you walk out feeling better about yourself than worse.
The Man from U.N.C.L.E.
Definitely my dad's movie.
Yeah.
Television show.
Oh,
Oh,
Well,
I haven't seen the movie.
Oh, you haven't with Guy Ritchie?
No.
You need to see that.
I'm thinking of the television show from back in the day with Robert Vaughn and all
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
Sorry.
I was a fan of The Man from U.N.C.L.E.
Yeah.
from the '60s, but you need to see that.
Okay.
The Gentleman, that Guy Ritchie's last
Right.
film.
I do. I like his stuff generally.
Definitely a dad movie.
Speaking. Okay, I believe that.
So Guy Ritchie might be a dad movie director.
More recent stuff, maybe. But I haven't seen most of his recent stuff.
Well,
I didn't see the King Arthur one.
Yeah, I didn't see that either. Luke said that it was mediocre.
Aren't all King Arthur movies unfortunately mediocre?
Yeah, I think that you may have.
I think they're
except the Sword and the Stone.
I think Excalibur is probably the closest to being incredible, but it's so bug nuts crazy that it's not.
That's bizarre.
It's bizarre, but
that's
it's
a psychedelic
excellent
film
and terrible concurrently. And it has Helen Mirren, which is always a big point in dad movies.
Is she Guinevere?
No, she is Mordred.
Mordred's Morgana.
Morgana Le Fay, yeah.
Mordred's mother. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Still, mind-blowingly attractive. Top 5 beautiful women of all time.
Helen Mirren?
I think so.
She's still very beautiful.
Yeah, she still pulls it off.
Yeah.
It's like you're 70, you're still pretty hot.
She just did an interview with Mark Maron that was worth going into.
Okay.
Where he brings up lots of films in her career that you don't necessarily
think of her being in.
Yeah.
Caligula.
No, he didn't bring up Caligula.
Okay. I've never seen that. I don't really.
What?
No, I just never.
I'll make you a copy.
I don't know if I need to see it. Right? It's not good, right?
No, it's not good.
Exactly. So,
but she's amazing in it.
And
she and Malcolm McDowell.
And that's why God gave us Google.
Yeah.
Or Google Images.
Google.
I mean, I don't know. Why do you ask? What's your definition of a dad movie? Oh, and sports. Sports generally got to play some kind of or competition. Is competition. That's probably something that really defines a dad movie.
Major League.
Yeah.
Dad. There's got to be like an element of comedy into it.
Yeah.
And absolutely. An element of stick it to itness.
Sure.
And when I think of Major League and Ford v Ferrari and almost an underdog nature.
Yeah, I tend to agree. And I think there's got to be a certain sense of morality with it.
Properness?
I'm not sure if it's properness, but they can't be morally ambiguous.
It's got to be definitive.
Are there any dad movies that really have anti-heroes as the primary character?
No, I can't think of one.
I can't either. I mean, they probably exist, but I can't really think of one. Because it's one of those where it's, it's apple pie, baseball, dad movies, That's what I'm thinking.
Okay.
I mean, Dirty Harry, maybe.
Dirty Harry is an anti-hero.
I know. That's what I'm saying. Maybe. Is that a dad movie? Probably not. I know my dad likes it, but I don't think it's a dad movie.
Is Dirty Harry an anti-hero? The first film?
Oh, yeah. I think so.
Because in the subsequent films, I see him definitely as a hero.
Right. And I think in the first one, he's an anti-hero.
Yeah.
I mean, he is definitely, depending on who you are watching that, you could definitely look at that character as morally bankrupt and a vigilante danger.
Right. Right.
I think it's just a really entertaining movie, and that's all it is, but that's okay.
So that segues into actually the next discussion that I have marked down, which is
Clint Eastwood movies.
Yeah. I mean, most of them are dad movies.
Oh, I don't know if that's accurate.
Which one is not? I mean, The Bridges of Madison County is not a dad movie.
Unforgiven's not a dad movie.
Oh, you don't think so? Because he's an anti-hero.
I didn't like that movie at all.
Oh, really?
I enjoyed it. He didn't like it at all.
I think my dad did like that movie.
Yeah. I think it's more recent stuff. I don't know. I mean, I haven't seen Richard Jewell yet. I don't know.
That is not a dad movie.
Is it not?
No, that's a screw-over movie.
I heard it's pretty good.
It's really good, yeah. Sam Rockwell's amazing in it.
As always.
That's another one of those things that we were talking kind of before about Eastwood's career and just how weird it was in this sort of trajectory. And one of the things that I find just continually amazing is this guy has a history of being sort of this far-right character in Hollywood.
Only because it's relative to Hollywood. But go on.
You think you would be right down the center if you were not in Hollywood?
I think it would be a lot more if it was not Hollywood.
If it was okay,
you know. But go on.
Well, that's okay. There are several of his films, and Richard Jewell is just one of them, where Richard Jewell has Sam Rockwell in it. Mm-hmm. And Sam Rockwell is very famously a Hollywood liberal. I mean, if you were going to pin him, and he would probably wear that as a badge and tattoo it on his chest, and that's perfectly fine. But if you look at Eastwood's films, I mean, Sean Penn and Mystic River, for example, how many times has Sean Penn gone to Haiti or the Dominican Republic to showcase the outrages there and so forth? People of the left don't tend to hold that against Eastwood. They tend to be the first thing to, I will clear my schedule to star in a Clint Eastwood movie.
Well, I mean, I do think it's one of those where, I hate the right wing, left wing type of things because, I mean, what you're saying with Sean Penn going to Haiti and injustice, like, I don't consider that left wing liberal stuff, right? Maybe humanist, right?
Well, to showcase what we've done wrong with.
Well, I guess that's where it becomes liberal or conservative is who do you assign blame to, right? Is it America's fault? Is it the world's fault?
Or the dictator in charge of that country?
Exactly. I guess it's really, but I mean, going to Haiti in itself and just contributing in some positive manner is not inherently liberal, right?
Right.
Because the implication is then that people who don't do that are conservative, which is just
that's a bizarre point to think about. Yeah.
But it is one of those where I think Clint Eastwood is regarded as a heck of an artist.
Yeah.
Right? And I think independent of anybody's political leanings that they always want to work with artists. I mean, James Woods is a notorious right-wing figure in Hollywood. And I think the reason he doesn't get a lot of work is probably just because he's just not that good of an actor anymore, as opposed to.
I think he's just too active on Twitter. I think that if the man would just shut up,
could be,
or if he never got on Twitter to begin with, he'd still be getting.
Could be.
We just watched. Luke and I just watched Casino. Yeah. He shows up in Casino,
and he's good,
and he's great in Casino. And I'm not a big Casino fan, but when he's on screen, I can't take my eyes off him.
Casino is okay. Go on.
Well,
Casino would have benefited had it not been the movie right after Goodfellas.
If he had done something in between.
If he had done 3 or 4 movies, I think that Casino would be more well-regarded.
I found it overlong, but that's just me.
No, it's not just you, because your son's over there nodding yes.
Back to Eastwood, the one thing that was Eastwood's kind of known for is building up this, I won't say hyper masculine like Stallone or Schwarzenegger,
certainly
but
not.
Definitely a strong masculine character up until about the time he starts directing.
Okay.
And then there's sort of the slow.
Have you ever seen Paint Your Wagon where he sings?
No, I have not.
Well, there you go. Go on.
Paint Your Wagon. It's a
musical.
Western musical.
Yeah, with Lee Marvin. They sing.
Lee Marvin sings.
Yeah, and so does Clint Eastwood.
Okay.
I can't tell you how freaked out I was as a kid when I saw that one. It's like, oh, these two guys? Yeah, this is going to be great. Oh, my God, they're singing. It's true. Go on.
Well,
it's actually pretty good, too.
Well, I was just going to say that I won't say that when he starts directing because that's Play Misty for me and the Iger Sanction and films like that, which are action and adventure tales and so forth. But certainly The Unforgiven does a lot to break down masculinity. The Bridges of Madison County.
Unforgiven doesn't break down masculinity. I'm not sure if I understand your point.
I think it rejects a lot of the things that people point to him. Like, it's not the man with no name going into town and burning it to the ground. That's not The Unforgiven.
I think it kind of does, actually, but it's just very interesting in that it takes it from the perception of the other people, right? Because I think it's kind of the same sort of... I don't know. I need to revisit it, but it is one of those movies that I knew was great as soon as I saw it just because it stuck with me. It's one of those things where it is certainly not clearly defined exactly. It doesn't lead you by the nose to saying, okay, here's the point, right?
Right.
At least to me it didn't.
Right.
I don't think it's anti-masculinity so much as it is a reevaluation of the
what
Western gunfighter.
Well, right.
Kind of like Shane, Well,
see, I never saw Shane as like this pro-masculine character. He seemed like this person who was damaged from violence,
but he's
and was trying to find a way.
I mean, he comes through in the end. He comes through in the clutch.
He does.
He gets you the triple and clears the bases.
Yeah. Have you seen Still Dawn? Patrick
Dawn?
Swayze, 1988.
Oh, I can tell you I have not.
Jesus Christ. Didn't we just say we were banning loud bangs in the kitchen?
I think you said they should be illegal, but I'm not sure if that was actually put to Congress.
Okay. Well, that's the masculine.
Oh, sorry.
We're nearing the end.
Okay. No.
You saw Crimson Peak recently?
Yeah, Crimson Peak is really good. Did you see it?
No.
I really enjoyed it.
Expound.
It's well, Del Toro is a very inconsistent filmmaker, right? It's kind of amazing how inconsistent he is, not necessarily from performance, but just from topics. I guess it's always kind of in your science fiction, fantasy milieu, horror milieu, right? But, I mean, this is the same guy that did Pacific Rim.
Yeah, I like Pacific Rim.
I don't dislike Pacific Rim, right? And if you told me that was the same guy that did Hellboy and Hellboy 2, I'd believe it. And the same guy who did Blade 2, I'd believe it, right?
Did he do Blade 2?
Yes. But...
Wow.
Yeah. But then you say he's the same guy that did Kronos or The Devil's Backbone or Pan's Labyrinth. You're like, what? That doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, Shape of Water.
Yeah, and I never saw that. I heard that was not good.
Yeah.
Even though it won the Oscar, I haven't seen it. But this is much more... Now, I liked his, the Kronos, the Pan's Labyrinth, the Devil's Backbone, which is a really effective, scary movie. This is just a very remarkably well-done gothic horror movie, right? That, from your perspective, you would probably enjoy just from the set alone and the cinematography and just the atmosphere is really pretty cool. Obviously, I hadn't really thought about it too much, but I remember turning it off saying, man, I really enjoyed that.
Yeah. Have you seen The Black Hole?
When I was a kid, I saw that I saw that y'all saw it recently. Something tells me it does not hold up like I think it does. But I got to remember when that movie came out and being so stoked to see it.
Yeah, I was stoked to see it. I bought it on DVD 20 years ago when DVDs first came out. I'm a big fan of The Black Hole, and I might be the only one.
Are you a big fan of the memory of The Black Hole or an actual fan of the movie?
There are many things to recommend it. First of all, there's Robert Forster.
Okay.
The cinematography in The Black Hole is
pretty cool.
Absolutely amazing. Mm-hmm. I don't know if they shot it on 70 or not, but you have got an enormous canvas, and the shot composition really boggles the mind.
Yeah, and it was by far Disney's most expensive movie at the time, wasn't it?
I think it was. I mean, it was 79. It was one of those batch of films like after Star Wars, they just greenlit a whole bunch of sci-fi shit that had no business being made. And if they had really just taken a pause and a breath and worked through it, The Black Hole, the script and the screenplay and the direction is horrible.
Okay, that's good. It's good foundation.
It's absolutely horrible. And if they had just fixed, there's nothing wrong with the production design.
Right.
Their models are amazing. Their space shots are kind of dated, but that's
a function of
it's
the
79.
Time. Yeah,
that's fine. Maximilian Schell is a great villain. The dialogue is a little bit hokey.
Again,
but it's overlaid with this John Barry score.
Mm-hmm.
John Barry did like 7 or 8 Bond films. He also did Game of Death, the Bruce Lee movie.
They finished after he died.
Yeah, which we'll get into that in a little bit. Yeah, well, probably about 5-10 minutes.
A later time. Okay.
Yeah, unless you want to wait until after you watch them.
No. Actually, go on. Continue.
But I think there's a lot of good things in The Black Hole. There's a lot of just ripped off Kubrick shots.
Okay.
Which is not bad. And actually, the farther away you get from Star Wars in that movie, probably the better.
Mm-hmm.
Right. But just in terms of it's not what the movie is about; it's how the movie gets there.
Right.
I mean, there is no action.
No, there's a little bit of action.
There's people firing lasers at each other and trying to run.
Okay.
That is in that film.
I like how you say trying to run. They
not
are not that successful at it.
They're not. It's not a very successful action movie.
Sure. Okay.
That's what I mean. But
Okay.
the image of the robots and Maximilian, the big Darth Vader like character, brilliant concept.
Yeah, I remember the big robot with a razor blade spinners.
Yes, just brilliant concepts, just not used effectively in storytelling. And so that's why I like The Black Hole.
Yeah, no, I have not seen that. Man, it's been forever.
You've seen Made recently.
Made.
Favreau's first film.
No, that's not his first film. Is it?
I believe it is.
Oh, it might be. Yeah, it might be the first
Swingers
film.
is Lehman's film.
Right, yeah. He wrote it and all that. But
yeah.
I don't know if I've ever seen Made. I really don't know if I've
Dave.
seen it. I don't know if I have.
Dave. We just got through talking about 90s cinema. You haven't seen Made.
I'm not going to sit here and say that I've seen everything.
You need to see Made.
I thought you. What did you think of it?
It was my second time seeing it, and I was about ready, and Luke too. I was about ready to strangle Vincent Vaughn.
That's not a
after about an hour, but that was kind of the point of the movie.
Right.
Sean Combs shows up in it.
Sean Puffy Combs?
Yes.
P. Diddy himself?
Yes.
Puff Daddy?
Yes. And I have to say, I want to see Sean Combs in more films. I thought he was amazing in Made, and I really think that he could have definitely more of a Hollywood career if he tried.
Or he could have, I suppose.
I don't know why he's not in more films. He seemed to have a natural presence on screen.
Yeah.
Not like a
I do wonder
infectious Eddie Murphy type,
right.
but certainly he seemed very skilled at it. You know, a lot of these performers, if you're going to get up on stage for 2 hours a night, you're putting on a show, you're putting on a character,
sure.
a play.
I guess he could probably do it now because he's not as well known.
How is he not as well known? He's Sean Combs.
David, we're asking my 15-year-old son. Do you know who Sean Combs is?
I do not.
Do you know who Puff Daddy is?
No.
See, there you go. You have to remember, this is 20 years ago, Jeff.
I'm only 15.
Moving on.
The Bruce Lee box set.
Okay.
Okay.
The Bruce Lee box set.
The Criterion Edition.
The Criterion Edition, which I have been eagerly awaiting for.
And you've gone through all the discs?
Yes. Well, no, not the supplements.
Okay.
Just the films. And there's only...
There's what, 5 movies?
Let's see. I'm going through this. No. So I think there's only 5 movies.
Oh, actually, I think there's... Okay.
There is
There's 7 or 6, right?
The Big Boss, 1971. Then Fist of Fury, 1972.
Return of the Dragon.
And then Way of the Dragon, 1972. And then Enter the Dragon, 1973. And then Game of Death, 1978. So five movies.
Isn't Game of Death 2 included in that as well? Is a bonus?
No, it's not. And I didn't even know about it until Luke found it on IMDb.
I think, for some reason, double check, I think Game of Death 2 is included, I think. I mean, I could be totally wrong. You own it and I don't.
It's possibly on one of the supplement discs
That's what I
that
thought.
I haven't gone into yet.
Okay, but go on.
So have you seen Game of Death 2?
I have not. I thought I'd seen that it was and being interested just from the curiosity standpoint.
Well, we ran through them all,
I believe it.
and except for the supplements. And the only Bruce Lee I was exposed to up until now, of course, is Enter the Dragon.
Right.
The director's cut that came out on DVD, which apparently has 6 minutes of Lee that no one had previously seen. And once you find out what scene it is, it's kind of amazing to think that film didn't have that footage in it. It's him philosophizing in the beginning about being a martial artist and what you want to do in
I'm not surprised that
training.
wouldn't be included at all, actually.
Yeah, it was
We're there
kind
for
of
the kung fu
shocking it
fighting.
wasn't in there. Yeah. And then I saw a documentary, I guess it was around 1980, 81, is when it was made. I don't know when I saw it, but it had people like Chuck Norris and Kareem Abdul-Jabbar talking about Lee, and I was telling Luke about it, about how he had to leave Hong Kong. Like he couldn't. Everywhere he went in Hong Kong, there'd be some guy out in the street tapping his foot 3 times, which was the challenge, and Lee would have to get into a fight with him, and then kick his ass and throw him into an apple cart and go. And he couldn't go anywhere.
Well, don't forget his hands were registered as lethal weapons. That means if he kills you, then he could go to jail.
Horse shit. Anyone who kills anyone accidentally goes to jail. It's called manslaughter. Anyway, so over the arc of the 5 films that we watched, I actually saw a growing actor.
Okay.
I saw the professionalism of...
Sure.
Now, we forget, of course, that he was acting for 10 years before he ever
with
headlined. He was in Hollywood a lot.
Yeah, he was in all... Was it Green Hornet? Right.
Yeah, for a whole year.
Right. And then, okay, but go on.
Yeah, so I found it very interesting to see basically his first starring role and his last starring role, and you can see the arc of him just becoming extremely talented over that period of time. That's separate from his fighting style, which was crazy. Mm-hmm. You talk about an individual fighting style just as catered to his personality as, say, Jackie Chan's was.
Right.
And completely...
Very
two different actors, 2 different fighting styles. Like Kung
Fu
is
really
not
worked
Kung
with
Fu.
Personality.
Yes, and I think it was the first one we watched, which was, I think, Way of the Dragon. You talk about speed. That guy was fast.
Yeah, he was kind of quick.
I couldn't believe, almost to the point where you were actually thinking, are they
must have sped the
speeding
film
up
up.
the camera? But
Right.
I don't think that they were. I think literally the frame rates just couldn't catch him. He was so
Right.
quick. You've seen camera pans, particularly at what's the standard industry rate? Is it 24 frames per second?
I believe so.
I think it's what it is. And things blur. Like on screen, they just blur. It's just not...
Which is a real problem with like the new TVs, that if they don't have the blurring on, it looks freaking weird.
Right, yeah. And I like what Peter Jackson's trying to do, which is to do the faster frame rate. I don't remember if it's 36 frames per second or 48 frames per second for The Hobbit or something like
distracting,
that.
I couldn't believe it. But
People find it distracting, but then when the camera pans across an action scene, then you can actually see everything.
Right, but that's not the way your eyes really work.
You prefer things are blurred?
Well, I'm not wearing my glasses right now. But no. I mean, go on. I am getting you off topic.
Yeah,
I
again,
don't
yeah.
want to do
We'll do more research.
Right.
We'll revisit that later. But Lee was just extraordinarily fast, and particularly by Game of Death, which you're going to have to go through and watch all of these so we can have a more in-depth conversation later. If I remember correctly from the booklet that came with the Criterion set, they shot 30 minutes of fights and never got to finish it because he passed away. Mm-hmm. And then they edited that 30 minutes down to 11 minutes or 12 minutes of 2 fights. And they used that as the finale for the film of Game of Death. And those are
Oh, 3 fights.
3 fights. 3 fights. So that's the finale of Game of Death. And you can really see where Lee was going with that film.
Yeah, if I'm not mistaken, wasn't he supposed to go up a pagoda with 5 levels?
Yes.
And each level was going to be a different fight style?
Right.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, and that was, And that was effectively was going to be the finale of the film, and it was going to be the last half hour. Mm-hmm. They just didn't have that much.
At least they had that.
At least they have that. We can talk more about it later. I'd encourage you to watch it, but I don't remember growing up thinking of Lee as an actor.
No, that's certainly not. Yeah.
Right. He was a kung fu guy.
Yeah.
Now Lee, to me, is an actor. Like,
okay.
You can actually see him. You see his talent, and it seems like such a missed opportunity where you have someone kind of like Sidney Poitier was the leading vanguard of the African American acting community. Yeah, Poitier, isn't that not his name?
Poitier.
Poitier.
There's no N. Poitier.
Poitier.
Portier.
Portier.
There's no N.
There's no Poitier. It's P-O-I. Poitier.
All right, go on.
Right? Is that not?
Go on. We're going off topic. It's my fault.
Pronounce it again.
Portier.
Poitier.
Sidney Poitier.
Sidney Poitier.
That's the way I pronounce it. That doesn't mean I'm right.
All right. He's a great actor.
Yeah.
Poitier.
Sidney. We're gonna call him Sid.
Sidney's great.
Sid.
Bruce is great.
Sid kills it.
What I was saying was it would have been awesome if Bruce was able to do with his career what Sidney was able to do. Sidney Poitier became a great director.
Yeah, absolutely.
Put out some awesome films. Like Stir Crazy is like Stir Crazy to think of as a Poitier film. But
yeah, it doesn't make sense.
No, it doesn't. But Shoot to Kill is awesome.
Okay.
That is an awesome, just
I don't think I've seen that. It's the one with him and Tom
hard-boiled,
Berenger?
fed film. It's the one with
Isn't it him and Tom Berenger?
Tom Berenger and
Yeah, that's
Kirstie
what I thought.
Alley from Cheers.
Kirstie. It's Kirstie Alley.
Did I say Kirstie?
Yeah. I guess I'm going to be that guy. I'm sorry.
So it's not Kirstie?
No, it's Kirstie.
Kirstie?
Kirstie.
Kirstie Allen.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. Again,
Kirstie
this
Poitier
is not relevant.
is
It's my fault.
that's all right.
I suck.
That's fine.
Okay.
But Shoot to Kill is awesome. So it'd be Bruce Lee had written a script, and he was choreographing his own fight scenes. Like the next step for him was to be a director.
Right.
So it would have been awesome to see.
Well, wasn't
him
Game of Death originally going to be his directorial debut?
I think that was the one was going to be the one that he was going to direct.
That's what I thought.
Yeah.
That I've read somewhere.
Yeah. So watch those, and we'll get back next time. What? Okay, Lucas spelled it out Poitier. Poitier.
Yeah, that's.
So when I originally said it, there was an N.
Yeah, you were saying Poitier.
Poitier. Okay. It is definitely not Poitier.
That's what I thought.
Yeah, it's Poitier. Oh, one thing that I forgot about before when we briefly mentioned Sydney was there's this great book called The Year That Hollywood Changed. It was about 1968.
Okay.
And it went through Bonnie and Clyde and Hello Dolly and Old Hollywood and
Wild
New
Bunch
Hollywood, the Wild Bunch, and Bonnie. Already mentioned Bonnie and Clyde was the other one I cared. Dr. Dolittle and what a catastrophe that was. And then they brought up Guess Who's Coming to Dinner and bringing Spencer Tracy out of retirement and doing that whole thing. And it was this almost laughable behind the camera scenario going on where film effectively has very challenging, obviously in the age of before digital. I'm trying to frame this into words. They had problems with Sidney on screen and how his skin color showed up in color after the fact. They ran several test runs, and they did several screenshots or screen tests so that they could choose the right color stock and then how to develop it properly later in the chemical process. And they were just having one hell of a time doing it because of the complexion of his skin, because let's face it, up to that time, Hollywood had not had a whole lot of successful leading black male actors or of any minority types in which they could successfully color photograph.
Sure.
And most of Poitier's films up to that point were black and white films where you just didn't have that same challenge.
Racist.
Right. So they were actually struggling to come up with the correct color correction, and they were struggling to get this timed right, and they're on a schedule and so forth. And this was supposed to be like one of these amazing breakthrough films in terms of destroying a boundary or breaking down a boundary. And at the same time, they've got these meetings in the studio about, okay, well, if we lighten his skin tone, it will help the color correction process. Okay. And then the director's saying, do you understand what you're saying? You're trying to lighten his skin color. The entire purpose of this film is to be more equitable and to break through the color barrier. And you're actually telling me to lighten his skin. I'm not going to do it.
I mean, that was purely from a technical perspective.
Right. It wasn't being done as a right.
It was one of those where it's like they're not trying to turn him into Ricardo Montalban.
That's an apropos point. Yes. Right.
But I understand. Yeah, I understand. The irony is
you're trying to whitewash a black man into making a film about a black man breaking through the barrier.
So if we make it lighter, it's a lot easier.
Right.
It is pretty comical.
Isn't that kind of our society. We just make it a little bit whiter, and then everything's fine. India has a huge problem with these whitening creams because India has a color scale just like the United States does. And they sell whitening creams, and they're trying to get darker Indians to use them. And there's a huge backlash in it right now. And then you get into notions of Michael Jackson and bleaching and surgery and all of that.
Right.
I just thought that was an interesting.
It is. I mean, it's definitely comical, right?
It is.
Absolutely is.
And to think that you would have to do anything to make Sidney Poitier any better of an actor, like he doesn't need it. He doesn't need it.
Right, but again, though, it's not that wasn't.
That wasn't
the
point.
The way you're saying it wasn't like to make it more palatable to the general audience. It was like, how do we save money? How do we make this work? Right.
Right. So they were having technical difficulties.
Right. It's like, look, we're just trying to make this work.
It was an interesting page.
Oh, it is that. It is funny.
Yeah.
I mean, it's inherently comical as all get out for sure.
For sure.
But I haven't seen that in forever, and it's just one of those. I need to go back and watch some more of those Tracy Hepburn movies because, like I said, I think
Bringing Up
Adam's
Baby.
Rib is the only. No, that was Katharine Hepburn and.
Cary Grant.
Cary Grant, thank you. It's like my favorite actor. I'm just brain locking, but it's
Cary Grant's your favorite actor?
I think so. Yeah, I think Cary Grant is my.
What's your
favorite
favorite Cary Grant movie?
That's the problem. Is I can't come up with one. There's like 15. North by Northwest, Philadelphia Story, His Girl Friday, Bringing Up Baby, Arsenic and Old Lace,
Charade,
exactly. What's the one that I'm? If Angels Had Wings. What is that one? The Howard Hawks movie.
Oh, yeah.
I'm just totally blanking. I mean, he was tremendous, and he had a lot of style. He was definitely suave and de boner.
Yeah. I've got a final thought before we can sign off.
Oh, okay.
I'm recently reading Peter Bogdanovich's book, Who the Devil Made It.
You're a big Bogdanovich guy.
I read a lot of his stuff.
Not a criticism. It's just an observation.
I haven't seen too many of his movies.
That is really ironic. That's more ironic than trying to lighten Sydney's skin.
Yeah. Well, as he is a film historian and a film documentarian, I really appreciate the man's work. Like he's given his life into understanding film as an art form. Just as a director, I'm not in. Like
You're
I've
just not
seen
compelled
Mask.
to watch him.
No, I didn't like Texasville. I'm not a big fan of Last Picture Show.
What about what's his?
Never saw Paper Moon.
What's the screwball comedy he did with?
They All Laughed.
No, I can't. I don't have my glasses. I can't.
His Girl Friday. No, that's.
You've never seen His Girl Friday?
It's Howard Hawks.
Yeah, it is
Howard
Howard
Hawks,
Hawks.
yeah.
No, that's not the one I was thinking of. I think it's Angels.
Something with Angels and Wings.
Something in Angels and Wings, and it's a male airplane thing in China, I think.
Yeah.
But okay, what about
Anyway, the one he did with Kirsten Dunst about the Hearst incident, The Cat's Meow. I really enjoyed that. But other than that, I'm not like a
right.
I just don't prefer his films, which is ironic.
You like his writing, just not his films.
I like his writing. He wrote a great book on Orson Welles called This Is Orson Welles. That was shortly after he died. Anyway, so I was reading this book, which came out about 20 years ago. It's hard to find in print, so I had to get Kindle book. I'm not big into Kindle books. I don't like digital media, so I'm trying to. I'm just parceling through it a few pages a day. But there was this very, very interesting take in it where he was talking to Alan Daly, who was one of the first filmmakers ever. Started his career, I believe, like 1908. Mm-hmm. He was actually an engineer, an electrical engineer, and got into it on the lighting side before he became a cinematographer. And then he got into screenplays. Then he got into editing. And everyone back in those days, here's the next note, which is Only Angels Have Wings.
I think that's it. Yeah. It's totally brain locking. It's embarrassing.
So in the early days, everyone who worked in film had done something before. Mm-hmm. Because film was so new. Right. That just only makes sense. Everyone had previous careers. But the interesting thing that he told Bogdanovich, in which Bogdanovich claims that he remembers because he had seen films earlier, it was when they were made out of silver nitrate and they were actually really using silver in the film. And there's at some point, I believe it was the late 1930s or early 1940s, they stopped actually using silver and they were using a substitute in the nitrate. But before they stopped using that additive, the film actually would glow
Okay.
on screen. So when you went to see the silver screen, not only was the screen itself
Hence
kind
the
of
name.
tinted silvery colors so it could give you the best reflection, but the film itself through the projector would cast a glow on screen that really enthralled the audience, and it was one of the reasons why the audience went back, is to see that magical glow.
Right.
And it was one of the things that in The Wizard of Oz, for example, they tried to recreate with color, and they probably failed, although if you see that and Gone with the Wind, there is something special about that haze, that colored haze that you see in both films.
In Adventures of Robin Hood. And,
Yes. Yes.
There's a very specific look that's of that time and of that material.
Yeah, the classic Hollywood.
Yeah, I find it very pleasing myself. I like it very much.
Very cool. So do you have any closing thoughts about classic Hollywood? Is there anything you want to recommend?
No, not off the top of my head, to be honest with you. I mean, classic Hollywood is classic Hollywood. I mean, you see any one of them, and they are the best, in my opinion. But the one thing we are going to have to get back to, and not today, sometime later, is I have this weird feeling, and I want you to confirm it right now. Who do you prefer, Paul Thomas Anderson or Paul W.S. Anderson? Dun, dun, dun.
Okay, PTA, as he's famously referred to as.
We are? Yep.
Or Paul W.S. Anderson.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to have to...
I bet you go with the latter.
You're going to have to give me some films of Paul W.S. Anderson.
Event Horizon.
Shit.
What's the name? He was married to Jovovich.
Mila Jovovich?
The Resident Evil.
I instantly like him.
Yeah, I suspect that's yes.
Yeah, she's born like a week after me. We're the same age.
So we're gonna have to revisit that.
So we were destined to be together. Even though she was born in Ukraine.
It's okay. Never would have worked out anyway. She's got red hair.
Let me pull up the IMDb so I can look at his films.
Because you might be the only person on the planet who I believe authentically would fall on his side.
Paul W.S. Anderson?
Yeah.
Anderson? Paul W.S. Anderson. Oh, he did the Resident Evil franchise.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's what I said.
Well, I
wasn't very clear.
Okay.
But he did that. He did Event Horizon.
Yeah,
I can't remember what.
Did not like the first hour of Event Horizon. It was like the first hour of Leviathan.
Yeah.
Oh, wow, that had potential. And then it just went to shit.
Well, it's more like
right
the
about
first,
the time Richard Crenna
It's about
dies.
the same as Sunshine.
Sunshine?
Is it Sunshine? The Danny Boyle sci-fi flick?
Oh, Jesus. He did Alien versus Predator.
That's pretty fucking terrible. That's pretty unwatchable.
No, he did Soldier with Kurt Russell.
Yeah, he did.
That's
He
a
does Soldier
badass
too.
film. No, I like that film. That's an underrated sci-fi action film. But I do remember Kurt Russell saying, like, never again, this is my last sci-fi. I'm not, No, that's a great movie. Don't like... He did Mortal Kombat.
The first one.
Yeah, the first in '95. Yeah. No, I like the Resident Evil films. I mean, I went to go see Resident Evil the premiere weekend. I think it was one of 8 people in the theater, and I thought that Jovovich is not an actor. She's a model, and she got into acting because she looks pretty. Because Richard Linklater said, "Let's throw that girl into this ensemble cast about kids in the '70s." And she really stands out because of her looks. And then she had to act on the fly. One of the best things that I've seen her do, not by Paul Anderson.
He did Death Race too.
Yeah, I saw that. Yeah, with Jason Statham. That was shit. Yeah.
I like that terrible movie.
Great concept, but I prefer the first Death Race.
Okay, go on.
The one with Roger Corman and David Carradine.
And Sly Stallone.
Yeah, Sylvester Stallone's in it as good. Yeah, but I think he's billed as Sly Stallone.
Yeah, because he's Sly.
Because he's Sly. Anyway, like I thought she was in a film that was really good. Mel Gibson was in it. It was very strange. The screenplay was written by Bono and The Edge. It was called The $1 Million Hotel.
Oh, I've heard of this.
Yes. And you talk about a concept that's interesting but does not work.
Right, but at least they tried.
They tried very hard, yeah. And the Jeremy Davies from Saving Private Ryan, he played the interpreter, and then he was in the remake of Solaris under Soderbergh.
Right.
Very good actor. He was in it. It was basically this hotel where every relative who couldn't afford mental health for their family members dumped them in this hotel and left them there. And that's why. And so it's called the $1 Million Hotel. So all these people have just different emotional issues, which was very sad to think that we treat members of our society that way. But regardless,
Well, that's a movie.
she was in this.
Those people treat those people like that. I take care of all the crazy people I know. Go on.
I just hope they take care of me because I'm the crazy one in my household. Isn't that right, Luke? Yeah. So anyway, that was an interesting film. That's one that, as far as her acting abilities, it stands out. Resident Evil, I thought she made some very brave choices in terms of her acting career. It's not easy to say I'm going to be an action star. I'm known for being this pretty thing, but now I'm going to be an action star. That's a career leap. So she tried very, very hard to do that.
Yeah, and that's kind of what she's been doing.
Right, and I think she's been doing it very successfully. I mean, she was married to Luc Besson for 5 or 6 years, and he tried to turn her into this enormous international star. And I would say largely it failed, although everyone is going to remember her in The Fifth Element.
Right, so I don't think it failed.
So
It couldn't
what
have
it
failed.
didn't convey into this enormously successful Angelina Jolie-like career is what I'm saying. Right. Mainly because of The Messenger. And The Messenger just absolutely flopped. And I'm not exactly sure why. That was the Joan of Arc movie.
Oh, I vaguely remember that.
Right, which had Dustin Hoffman in it, which was confusing to everybody. Why is Dustin Hoffman in this movie? Yeah. But regardless of it, the career arc that she did for the Resident Evil movies and how they tie in together. I'm not the Resident Evil expert. My brother, believe it or not, he's the Resident Evil expert. He's got them all, watched them all every year. He could probably be more informed on this particular topic. But I do like those 6 films. Right? So,
going back to the original, who do you like better?
I do not care for PTA.
That's the thing. It's I got to hear it. It's do you like Paul W.S.
PTA.
Anderson more than Paul Thomas Anderson?
I don't see anything likable in his films.
Nah. Okay. I think we should be done because this will.
But you're not going to ask me about Wes Anderson?
Well, Wes Anderson's great.
Yeah.
Everybody loves Wes Anderson.
Well, I don't know if it's particularly true, but if you're going to choose one of the Andersons out of those 3, I love Wes Anderson. I love his movies. I will sit through his films. I find his idiosyncratic nature and his quirkiness
charming.
Just absolutely charming. Charming is a very good word for it. My wife and I watched that one crazy one with Ralph Fiennes in the hotel.
Oh yeah, that's great. Grand Budapest?
Yeah, the Grand
really
Budapest.
Entertaining.
That was shockingly good and
really
funny. We laughed all the way through it. We thought it was great.
Yeah, his new one's supposed to be coming out, but who knows when now?
Yeah, not the Darjeeling Limited. That was the last one, but the one that's supposed to be coming
Grand
out.
Budapest was the latest. Actually, I think Isle of Dogs was his latest, which I haven't seen.
I have not seen that.
It's one of his stop motion ones.
Yeah. I understand it's good though. I understand.
Yeah.
And the Fantastic Mr. Fox.
Yeah, he did that one too.
Yeah, that's amazing.
That's really
also on
entertaining.
Criterion. Yeah, I've got Rushmore. I like Rushmore, although it's not stellar.
Rushmore's pretty darn good.
And
first film or second?
Who did the production design on Bottle Rocket was Polly Platt.
I think I did know that.
Yeah,
and she's quite well known and talented.
Yes, yeah, and she's getting a little bit more.
Yeah, a little bit more
known now that podcasts are coming out every other week. But anyway, I just wanted to end on that note, and thanks for bringing up the Anderson trifecta.
We'll definitely revisit, and I'm going to show up with some homework.
Okay.
All right, man.
We'll do it. Thanks
Thank
very
you very
much
much.
for coming by.